several announcements. Number one, the number of toiletries being donated is huge. And we thank everybody. As Gary says, clearly he's been traveling too much because he's brought back a whole bunch of these things. We got another bag here from somebody else. We got, look at this bag, watch this bag of toiletries. Right? We have to make sure there are. We hope there's not enough women in the battered women's center who need this, but if they're there, there's enough here to certainly keep them clean. To David Schwartz of the South Jersey Men's Club, on behalf of Samos Jewish Family and Children's Service, please accept our sincere thanks to you and the members of the South Jersey Men's Club for the donation of sample health and beauty products. Your generosity enhances our efforts to reach those families less fortunate. Our goal is to continue to make a difference in the lives of the individuals and families we serve. With the help of donations from supporters such as you, we will continue to serve those in our need, who are in need in our community. Very nice.
You wanted to.
Okay. We also have donations of used eyeglasses. So if you have excess eyeglasses, bring them in. Richie Moskowitz collects them and also donates them.
And Jerry?
Yes.
The Yellow Ribbon Club, somebody was kind enough to bring in some baby wipes. I sent an email out. They're not bathing and showering there for weeks at a time, and they can use things like baby wipes and lip balm. So any donations in the future, I'll get them to the Yellow Ribbon Club. Thank you.
We also have cell phones galore, including in one case, the instruction manual, all right, and a whole box that we got everything. So again, Larry, you get this one? Yeah. Okay. Larry donates them also to the Women's Detention Center, battered Women's Center. So thank you. I have my trusty gavel here. So thank you all for your donations. Next month, our meeting will be the Middle East Institute function, all right, which is March 17th. Okay, so Bob Greenberg is organizing our effort. As you know, we organize all the food for that function. We set up the tables, all right, and we need a lot of labor to do that. And that is the subject of our March meeting. We will not have a meeting on the last Sunday in March, which is March 31st, okay? No meeting. And the reason you can remember that there's no meeting is that you'll have matzah on your table. And because it's Passover, all right, we can't use the kitchen, so we won't have a meeting, okay? So Bob's going to talk about the Middle East Institute, and we need a lot of volunteers for that.
Good morning. Good morning.
Oh, I got the microphone.
Yeah, you got the microphone. No kissing, at least not in public. This year's Middle East Institute is March 17th. It's not hard to remember if you're Irish. Okay, the topic is going to be Israel at 65, confronting the threat of radical Islam. There's going to be two speakers. One is Yaron Seidman, who's our general counsel for the Mid-Atlantic region, and Avi Yurek, who is an expert on Middle East terrorism, and it should prove to be a very interesting program. We need approximately 30 people to help out. We're going to need people in the kitchen. We're going to need people to set up the room. Meeting will start, the breakfast will start at 9:15, which means that we have to be ready to go at 9. which means that we have to get there. There will be people getting there at about 6 o'clock in the morning. So we'll need people coming in roughly between 6 and 6:30 for the kitchen help. And to set up the room, you got to get there by 8. Takes us about 40 minutes to set up the room. So I have a paper going around right here. I'll start over here. Please sign up. We'll be sending emails as a follow-up. And guys, have any questions? Yes?
What will we pay to get into
We'll work that out after. The most we will pay will be $18. Right now, let me tell you what it's running. Let's see if it's on here.
30, I think.
It's more than that. I don't have it on here. It's 36 in advance and 45 at the door, if I remember correctly. Is that sound about right, Ed?
Yes, it does. So I get the flyer in the mail.
Oh, they finally sent out a flyer?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, because I haven't gotten the flyer yet. So it just goes to show.
The Flyers aren't doing much anyway.
Yeah,
Don't worry
well,
about it.
no, they did real well. They won. Any other questions? Okay. Well, if you do, speak to me after the meeting. Other than that, if you can volunteer, please do. We need, like I said, all the help we can get.
Thank you. Thank you, Bob. Gary, can you put my name on there too, please? Thanks.
I usually speak to you as a representative of the men's club to the JCRC. However, I have a separate issue. I know someone, this is a strange request, I know someone who is a Jewish man who was recently released from prison. He's an ex-offender, and he's desperate to find work. So I'm going to be sending out an email at some point. If you know somebody or you yourself think you could possibly hire a good working man, please contact me. I could put the two of you in touch with each other. Thank you.
Sports. As long as Barry's here, I'd like to impose and find out what's going on with our sports teams.
JAG will consist of 12 softball teams this year. We'll sponsor one with a runner-up from last year's participation. We may have some spots for 1 or 2 players. If you have a son, a grandson, or a nephew whom you'd like to sponsor in terms of South Jersey Men's Club membership, we'd be delighted to have them. We'll start practicing the second Sunday in March. Please contact me if you have an interested player. The JAG bowling tournament will be the second Sunday in March, Larry?
The 17th is the night of the ladies.
Okay. March 17 in Mount Laurel. We put together a 3-man team. If you're interested in participating, please let me know. We'd love to have you.
Thanks. Thank you. Nelson.
Thank you. This is about Operation Maccabee. As many of you know, every year we send troops cards, and U.S. troops and Israeli troops cards, usually for Hanukkah. This year we're doing it for Passover. I should have briefed you ahead of time. Yeah, we just didn't have time to do it around Hanukkah. We've had responses from a lot of the religious schools in the area. I think I have about 1,000 cards. I put some blank cards on the table if you want to take an opportunity to sign your names on it, or just don't sign your names and just say something that you want on there if you don't want your name on it. It's one of those feel-good things. Yeah, we're doing this with the Jewish War veterans. Jews do fight. Jews are in the war. Jewish Welfare Board says we have at least 10,000 Jews actually in the military now. I think the number's much higher. I just attended a memorial service in D.C. where we buried another Jew that was killed in Afghanistan. That at least 50 Jews have been killed in Afghanistan and Iraq. A very touching ceremony. Again, please take a few minutes, fill out a card, send it to our brethren overseas. Thank you. The cards are very touching. I have some of these cards from the kids on the table over here if you want to take a look at them. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Yes, hi, the Federation of Jewish Men's Clubs, which some of you may not know, we've been club number 503 for over 21 years now. Actually, I think we were before that when it was Beth Jacob Beth Israel Synagogue. And their convention every 2 years is going to be coming up this July. This one is in Boston. And we traditionally have people attend the conventions. And there's a subsidy from the region. We're part of the Middle Atlantic region of the Federation of Jewish Men's Clubs. And we traditionally set up a pool of money that's divided up from the people attending them. I intend to go. If anyone else does, please speak to me later. That's number one. Second subject was on Israel. A lot of news about Israel lately. And not too much of it is good. Not too much is good. We can always find positive things from all the wonderful projects and technology and humanitarian aid that Israel provides around the world, regardless of people's religion. I mean, they've sent help to, just you name the country. It's like over 100 countries, and they have a program called Mishav, where they train people from other countries on everything that they're experts in to help benefit their society and their people. But unfortunately, the forces arrayed against Israel, whose goal is to destroy Israel and kill Jews, they're getting stronger and taking over governments. Well, one of the things that's happened lately is there's hunger strikes. As some of you, I'm sure everybody remembers something called the Intifada, or uprising. Well, there was 2 of them already, and some people say that the next one is ready to start. And it started already with, there's been riots within the last few days where people are actually getting hurt. The Israelis have to use their rubber bullets or tear gas, and a lot of it has to do with the pretense now is about hunger striking prisoners. Well, some of the prisoners, there's 4 of them, and the number 1 guy, I'm sure there's be a lot of sympathy for him. He was one of the guys who was released for the Gilad Shalit exchange. And this guy was arrested. Why was he arrested? Because he had tried to machine gun a bus full of people. That he didn't kill any was just a miracle. I mean, there's people still who were on that bus who are still in pain today. So he was recaptured and sent to jail for breaking the agreement. And he's one of the guys who are doing this hunger strike. And the leadership of the Islamists in the West Bank, and I don't like saying West Bank, but that's another thing altogether, they say that if he dies or any of the hunger striking prisoners die from the hunger strike, that this will ignite the worst possible intifada or uprising that Israel has ever seen. But never forget, the issue isn't that Israel lets this guy die. The issue is this guy tried to kill many people. The other guys tried to kill many people. They were released and tried to do more things to kill people. And this is supposed to be that Israel is the bad guy. You watch in the media, Israel will be portrayed as bringing on the uprising. But it just doesn't happen that way. So when you hear people say things about Israel letting these people starve to death, it's their choice what they're doing. So speak up. That these aren't innocent people that were captured and for political reasons or ideology. These are people who are trying to kill people just like you, your family, your children, grandchildren, the people that you sit next to in shul because they're Jews. Well, that's about it. The good news is the Israeli people in charge in the army and the government, they feel pretty confident. But they did also before 1973 when they almost lost that war. But we have to support them in public as much as we can. Any questions? Nelson?
Let me quickly say something. Mike was kind enough to introduce me to some people at the Israeli embassy last week. Or was this week? I'm losing track of week.
This week.
This week. He actually knows people. He's important. We're lucky to have him in this neighborhood. Okay, the other side is when we were going through security, he used one of those slide things. The security guard asked us, do you have any sharp objects? So he pointed to his head, meaning that his brain stirred. I thought he was going through a strip search, maybe a body cavity search. And if you would have taken me through that, I wouldn't have walked in, Frank. But he does know these people. And when we walked in, when we actually got into the embassy, he was ordering people around. I want another cup of tea. I want this and this. And they listened to him. So again, my message is, we're lucky to have him in our neighborhood. He's really good for us.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nelson.
Okay, very good. Very good. I just read this week about the second Intifada. This was the Intifada that started after Ariel Sharon allegedly went up to the Temple Mount, or didn't allegedly go to the Temple Mount, but allegedly instigated a reaction by going up to the Temple Mount. And the New York Times carried this as Ariel Sharon instigated the second Intifada. Well, documents have just come out showing that it was Yasser Arafat who ordered the planning for the second Intifada when he came back from Camp David after refusing to make a deal with the then Prime Minister Barak. He went back to Israel and immediately began planning for the second Intifada. And it was all set to go, and all they were waiting for is something that they could blame it on, but it was already organized. And the New York Times, I know, trumpeted it all as being Ariel Sharon's fault, and clearly it wasn't. And it's interesting to hear Mike talk about this, that they're already planning the third, and they'll use some provocation and say it was because of that provocation that the whole thing has started. That it's all, excuse me, it's all grassroots, and clearly it's not. It's all a plan. Just a reminder before we bring on our speaker that we do have the book exchange in the back. There are a whole bunch of books there that you may take. Feel free to take. And if in the future you want to bring books, fine, but you don't even have to. There are books there. Just take. The worst place for a book is on a shelf. The best place for a book is in your hands reading it. So feel free. Okay. Yes, sir.
Dave, Matt Wynn was on vacation. He asked me to attend the meeting.
He's in Thailand.
Anything to get out of having to talk about this. The Tour de Shoals, which was the bike ride that I participated in Pennsylvania last year. It was to raise money for Camp Ramah. All the men's clubs in the area participated. This year, Sunday, September 22nd, I believe, it's going to be held in New Jersey. And I was at an organizational meeting at TBS last Wednesday. It's still very preliminary. They don't know yet where the ride is going to start from. It'll either be TBS or Bethel. A lot of logistics have to be worked out, as well as sponsorships. They want people from the men's clubs to help out, and there's going to be a lot of planning behind this. It includes marking the routes and having people helping the riders point the way where to go when they have to make turns, and helping to serve food. So you're going to hear a lot more about it as we get closer to the event.
Great. Thank you. Okay. Those people who have volunteered for today's Purim party, you probably know who you are, but there's about 6 or 7 of us who have volunteered to go downstairs and participate in today's community Purim party. Thank you all very much. Ned, you're going, Ed, you're going, Don. Anybody else here who's going to it? It's just 3? Wow, I thought it was more than that. Maybe, I could have sworn it was more than that. Okay, but thank you, you 3, for volunteering. Dave, do you want to bring up our speaker?
Please welcome Troy Collins, who's from the Franklin Institute. He's going to talk about possibly some educational programs, behind-the-scenes things at the Franklin Institute and the Dead Sea Scrolls. He's on the board here at the JCC. So please welcome Troy Collins.
Thank you. Can I give you this? Yeah. Just flip it in there.
There we go. Good morning, everybody. I'm going to let this machine warm up just for a quick second here and thank everybody for having me here today. I really appreciate the opportunity. While this is warming up, I'll give you just a quick snapshot of myself, and we're going to spend a few minutes on the Franklin Institute before we delve into the real subject today, which is Dead Sea Scrolls. I was born and raised in Cherry Hill, New Jersey. In fact, my mom still lives in the house that I grew up in, and my family is still in the region. I left for a while to go to New York to work, and ended up coming back just like so many others of us. I spent 6 years on the board of the JCC here, took a 6-year break, back on as of the last annual meeting. It's really a great place. I grew up, as I said, in the region. I was a 12-year veteran of the JCC camps in Medford, between a camper and working there. And now my kids are working there, and it's just, it's one of these places, and I think if you're from out of the area, you don't realize what an unbelievable resource this JCC is and the camp program. There's really little duplication that you can see around the nation. I started after college at an organization. Yeah, that'd be good. Thank you. I started at an organization which some of you may be familiar with, Spectacor. I spent 7 years at Spectacor when it was just Ed Snyder before Comcast took hold of it. I left this area and worked at Radio City Music Hall in New York for several years. Came back to another local homegrown company called Electric Factory Concerts, which it was eventually bought by what's now a public corporation known as Live Nation. When I got tired of that business, they were just bringing the Battleship New Jersey to Camden, and I ran that project for 7 years and had the remarkable opportunity to go over and be the senior VP for the Science Center for the Franklin Institute. The big advantage of the Franklin Institute is it's an icon and it's a legend. It has been around as an organization since 1824 and has been in the current building since 1934. It's also interesting that its leadership consists of a lot of Jewish individuals from a philanthropy standpoint. The chairman of our board is Marcia Perlman. Marcia is the daughter-in-law of Jeffrey, who is the son of Ruth and Ray Perlman, and the sister-in-law of Ron Perlman of New York fame. Also, Ira Lupert Adler Partners, a billionaire real estate investor, a lot of Jewish leadership in the Franklin Institute. So I really want to talk before we get into the Dead Sea Scrolls, because there's some interesting facts about the Franklin Institute that most people don't know. They think of it as a place where you go in, you buy a ticket, you go to the planetarium, you walk through the heart, you have a good time, and you go home. But we really are more than that. We are a nonprofit. We welcome over 900,000 people a year. 200,000 of them are school children, and up to 25,000 kids a year come for free as part of our Title I Access program. And we do try to measure our economic impact. Over the last number of years, since 2005, we've measured that at about $300 million for the region. We also have an awards program, which I will touch on briefly as well. This is the Franklin Institute. And am I in your way here? I don't have a clicker, so I step to this side here. Let me bring this back. That's the Franklin Institute that you're most familiar with. All the museum galleries, the 4 theaters, there's a live science show theater, a planetarium, a domed IMAX. Now, you see IMAX all over the place these days, but it's not the real IMAX. This is the real IMAX, the domed version of the screen, as well as a 3D theater. We have become known in recent years for our traveling exhibitions. It started way back, actually, in 2004 with Titanic, which is there now. Body Worlds, its first iteration, played the Franklin Institute. King Tut, the Franklin Institute still holds the attendance record for King Tut. 1.3 million people came through that exhibit that year. No other city, Los Angeles, Chicago, New York, no other city has beaten that record as yet. And of course, Dead Sea Scrolls was one of our traveling exhibitions as well. We do have Titanic back as part of the 100th anniversary, and we are opening up an exhibit that we developed actually in conjunction with the CIA Museum, which is a museum that's not even open to the public, called Spy, The Secret World of Espionage. It will feature dozens of newly declassified objects that have been used in real espionage operations around the world to learn a little bit about what the CIA actually does. Our outreach program. So we have a mission as a nonprofit. The mission is to inspire a passion for learning about science and technology. We don't teach science. We don't have people long enough to be able to teach them science, but if they can leave the Institute with a curiosity, with a question, with a desire to look something up on the internet or ask their teacher a question, we feel we've done their job. Science has taken a back seat. You don't find it on many standardized tests. You don't see it on the SAT. You don't see it on New Jersey Ask tests. You don't see it on the PSSA in Pennsylvania. And also, we are faced with growing science denialism. So there have always been issues between science and religion, but now we have a lot of folks, for example, I'll take the immunization argument. Hollywood celebrities can stand up in front of the media and say, if you get your child immunized for MMR, they're going to get autism. And there's very little science based around that. And our objective is to try and address those issues in a way that gets adults reactivated in science to get their kids interested as well. We have a few programs. I'm not really going to go through them. A lot of high-touch programs for urban at youth. We have a research department that specializes in getting girls engaged and interested in science. We have what we call a grant called CLUES, which is climate change in urban environments, to educate people on how they can make a difference in urban environments on protecting their climates. And we have discovery camps that operate during the holidays and during the summer as well. This is just a number of our other programs as well. I'm going to skip through that. The Science Festival is in its third year. We got a grant from the National Science Foundation to produce a citywide festival. We put over 100 organizations, colleges, universities, other museums, and groups together. Last year we had over 100,000 people attend over 110 events throughout the city, which included a Science Carnival Day, which this year again will take place on the Benjamin Franklin Parkway. And we have a school called Science Leadership Academy. It's a magnet school in partnership with the School District of Philadelphia. 95% graduation rate and going into four-year institutions, and about half of those kids going on to major in science, mathematics, or technology-related fields. And we're very proud of our Franklin Awards program. Every year it recognizes worldwide achievement in science. A lot of these people are not household names. You never know about them. So you ask a kid today, name a famous athlete, name a famous movie star. They can all do it. Name a famous scientist, and people struggle a little bit, even in the adult community. These people are the folks that are making a difference in our world. Usually we give one award that is an achievement for business in science. This year it's going to Michael Dell. In past years, we've had Bill Gates, we've had Ted Turner, we'd have T. Boone Pickens, and in the early days of the awards program, we had folks like Thomas Edison receive the Franklin Medal. Over 125 Franklin Medal winners have gone on to win the Nobel Prize. So we call it an early predictor of success. We are in the midst of wrapping up a major capital campaign. The goal was $64.7 million. We have hit $65.2 million, so we're done, and a little bit overfunded. It went to a wide variety of projects, several new exhibitions, the renovation of the Franklin Memorial, which most people know about, some infrastructure and safety issues, but really the big project is a brand new addition that's being built as we speak called the Karabatz Pavilion. The Karabatz Pavilion is 53,000 square feet. Karabatz comes from Nicholas and Athena Karabatz, who gave us $10 million to name the building. It's going to include an education and conference center on the ground floor, a new $10 million, 10,000 square foot exhibition called Your Brain on the second. And the third floor will be brand new traveling space with full museum climate control, something that we don't have. So we'll have 20,000 square feet of space for traveling exhibitions once that space opens. So now on to the Dead Sea Scrolls. So just by show of hands, how many people saw the exhibit at the Franklin Institute? Yeah, we got a good number of people. How many people have seen the Dead Sea Scrolls in Israel? Okay, so great, a good number. We had started with the Israeli Antiquities Authority probably about 4 years ago. First with a couple of phone calls, a couple of visits over there, and we said, listen, you guys have lent scrolls to museums before. You've given them 5 scrolls, you've given them 6 scrolls, you've given them maybe 50, 60 objects to tour around, and they've created a little exhibit, and they've done really well. But these things are really, really important. And you're doing them an injustice by lending them to one institution at a time and making it so expensive. This is a story to tell. And the Antiquities Authority said, yeah, we want to tell this story. And we decided we're not going to loan the scrolls out anymore unless the people borrowing them agree to build an exhibit of scope and size and relevance that we deem worthy. So we said, okay, what do you deem worthy? And they gave us their plans, and we looked at them, and we said, it's going to take $6 million just to build this. We can't. We need to do this outside of the Franklin Institute as well. They said no. So we went back home and waited a few months, tried again, and we found out that there was a group in New York that was actually trying to do the same thing. And they were going home saying the same thing. We'd love to do it, but we can't make it work. So by this time, Uzi Dahari, who's the deputy director of the Antiquities Authority, said, I think you guys have made your point. We want to tell this story. We want to tell the story of the scrolls, not how they were discovered. Most people tell the story about how they were discovered, and that's the end of it. We want to tell the story of how they were written, where they were found. We want to begin that story in the Iron Age, from the First Temple period on forward. So help us do that. So hence, the Franklin Institute became the co-producer of an exhibit that's now called Dead Sea Scrolls, Life and Faith in Ancient Times. The exhibit toured in New York. It is was in Philadelphia, is in Cincinnati now, and I'll give you a preview of where it is headed next. For those of you who have seen it, your opinions certainly can speak for themselves, but the press has been spectacular. In fact, the Israel Antiquities Authority brought over all the top brass to both Philadelphia and New York, and they said, this is nothing like has ever been done in Israel. In the Shrine of the Book, all we have are the scrolls. There's really no media pieces. There are no supporting objects. We're not telling a story in there. And there are a lot of replicas in the Shrine of the Book as well. This is just a beautiful exhibit. We were lucky enough to have President Obama speak to our graduating Science Leadership Academy students at the Franklin Institute when he was in town. It certainly didn't help that he was able to tour the exhibit afterwards. Okay. I don't want to spend too much time on the story. I assume most people at least know the background of the scrolls. They were thought to have been written by the Essens in the caves outside of Qumran and meticulously preserved there. They were found in the early 1900s by a shepherd goat herder whose child accidentally threw a rock into a cave and heard shattering, and expected to find jewels, coins, money, some other sort of treasure, and was very disappointed when all he found was scraps of paper. When archaeologists came upon that discovery, they knew that it was important. And when the Bedouins realized that it was important, they used to actually sneak in there at night. And they discovered more scrolls than the archaeologists who were out there. And many ended up on the black market before a massive effort by the government of Israel. A lot of actually covert and secret operations to buy back, to purchase, to reclaim those scrolls and bring them back to Jerusalem. The interesting part of all this is that many of the scrolls ended up in Jordanian hands when the Rockefeller Museum was before the Six-Day War on the Jordanian side of the political line. So Israel recaptured that museum after that war. The Jordanian government today, despite its relatively good relations with Israel, still claims ownership of these scrolls. So one of the biggest issues we have to deal with, or that Israel has to deal with when the scrolls leave the country, is what we call judicial immunity. So the scrolls, about 5 or 6 scrolls were in Toronto about 10 years ago, and the Jordanians filed a major lawsuit, which was heard by Canadian courts, so that the Jordanians can literally seize those scrolls while they were in Canada. What we do here in the United States is we put together a fairly large package for the State Department that says, number one, these are important objects. Number two, they're of great cultural significance. And number three, they are part of a cultural exchange. Those statements literally get written into the Federal Register, and the Israelis will not let the scrolls leave Israeli airspace until they see that publication. Well, what does that do? Let's say the Jordanians filed suit while the scrolls were in Philadelphia and said they belong to us. And let's say a court granted them an audience. The likelihood is, and there's no guarantee because of the separation of the executive and judicial branches, that a judge will hear this case, make reference to the Federal Register, and say, no, these were brought over here for a cultural exchange program. They are immune from seizure. So that protects them. We are now looking at possibly bringing this show to Mexico City. And before that can happen, we have to get assurances from the Mexican government that they will protect the scrolls.
Why is it that the scrolls are so important to the Jordanians if these were written by Jews?
Well, we interpret they were written by Jews. The Jordanians don't necessarily agree with that assessment. And in fact, there are some Jewish scholars, in fact, a gentleman by the name of Norman Golb, whose son, Raphael Golb, is actually going to be serving time in prison for his methodology of opposing some of these opinions. So the Jordanians also see them as high value. So one of the questions I always get if I ever do a presentation on Dead Sea Scrolls, well, how much are they worth? How do you insure these things? You can't. You could probably get on the open market, and I wouldn't discount a government trying to make money from the scrolls. Originally, when we valued the scrolls for insurance purposes, they were $10 million a fragment. There's over 900 fragments, but really, they're priceless. There's also just the political issue of it was ours, or so we claim it was ours, and now you took it. So there is some rationale that is purely ego and politically based.
I saw the scrolls
Yeah.
in the Jewish Museum in Cleveland about 5 years ago. But the way you described the way this was put together, was that something different than what's now going around?
Yeah, and the biggest difference is the scrolls before, any of the scrolls that any museum has ever had to have come from the Antiquities Authority. But each institution was only able to put together a very small exhibit with a small story. We actually produced the largest ever exhibition. It's about 17,000 square feet with the largest collection of scrolls, authentic scrolls ever to leave Israel. So the story that we're telling, they give us the objects, we create the story, and we create the elements that go along with it.
So you basically have everything.
Yeah.
Is there any more?
Do you have a website that has the Dead Sea Scrolls or a link to it?
We have a website that's for our partners. The Israel Antiquities Authority, if you Google that, they've begun a digitization process, so you can see them online now.
Are they confident that they've retrieved all of them that were out on the open market?
No, because in fact, there's a Syrian church in Teaneck, New Jersey that has several scrolls. There's a Baptist seminary in Fort Worth, Texas that has several scrolls. And the scrolls consist really of a replication of the Old Testament, and there's numerous other writings too that were more political and government writings, rules of society, laws, and so forth. 3 main materials, a few papyrus, a lot of animal skin, and 1 copper scroll. There is a scroll with the 10 Commandments on it. New York had it for 2 weeks. We just convinced the Antiquities Authority to let us have it for the close of the Cincinnati exhibit for 2 weeks. Some of the scrolls are in very poor condition. They're hard to read. They're fragments. They're ripped. Some of the scrolls are beautifully laid out. They actually open up like you would see a Torah open up. But they are all very, very valuable. When the scrolls were first discovered, they were being worked on by religious scholars and not preservationists and not archaeologists. So if you saw the exhibit in Philadelphia, there was a film that we had in one of the back galleries that showed the early work on the scrolls, where you would have these guys working in rooms being bathed in sunlight, you know, which deteriorates the scrolls, with cigarettes hanging out of their mouth, putting Scotch tape on them to piece them together. So mankind did 10 times more damage to them in 10 years than the desert did in 2,000 years. So the work of the Antiquities Authority now is to really undo a lot of that damage. There are 20 scrolls that appear in a market at any given time. They get swapped out about midway through. So again, if you saw the exhibit, they're in climate-controlled cases in very low light levels, but even then it's not good for them. So they get swapped out. Those scrolls go back to Israel. Couriers bring 10 new scrolls that go into the case. The swap-out period takes a period of several days. It's done overnight so as not to disturb visitor hours, and it takes 2 to 3 hours to demount one scroll out of the case and replace it with another. There are only 4 people at the Israeli Antiquities Authority that are authorized to literally touch the scrolls.
They don't have cigarettes dangling from them?
No cigarettes dangling from them. Yeah.
Unless it's got a filter.
Yeah, that's right. If you saw the exhibit, one of our signature pieces here is our introductory gallery, which we call the Desert Orientation Theater. It's a hard floor. Around it is desert sand. We took a tremendous amount of footage in Israel, at the Western Wall, at the sites in Qumran, and at the Dead Sea to create these panoramic shots. There's a live presenter that literally introduces you to what the scrolls are, why they're important, and 3 jars. One jar that was used for purification water at a temple, and another jar which is the one you see in the upper right-hand corner, held a scroll. And that's literally your introduction to the story. When you leave that area, you go down a gallery. We call it our Timeline Gallery. It's a collection of artifacts that literally starts right around the time the scrolls were discovered. And by the time you reach the end of that hallway, you've gone back 2,000 years in time. The next 2 galleries are objects from Israel and from Jerusalem that really tell the story during that time period of when the scrolls were written. And I'm going to zip through a few of these. And we enter in what we call our scroll gallery. So this looks familiar to those who saw the exhibit. The table holds the scrolls. We had this table designed. I'll tell you more about that in a little bit. If you look right there, those are the insets where the scrolls are. These pieces that you see on the outside are digital replications of them, so that as you view the scroll in the case, you can see what it actually looks like. And then there's some text on either side, which is both the interpretation of the scroll in English, as well as some commentary on the scroll. If you look in the back here, this was a plaster cast taken at the Western Wall. This stone is actually a 2-ton stone from the wall itself. It fell off probably about 300 to 400 years ago, and it sat near the Davidson Center for a while. And Israel was kind enough to let us take that stone. The outer walls are more artifact cases that talk about daily life. Herodian home mosaics and household items, ossuaries, eating implementations, things of that nature. And behind the walls, we have several galleries. One, the film I told you about that talks about the early days of the scrolls when they were discovered. We have a 10 Commandments interactive where you can literally touch a commandment. It'll show you where it exists in the scrolls. It'll read it out loud as it was written and then provide the interpretation. And on the back side of the Western Wall is a live feed from the wall itself, 24 hours a day. We can see what's going on. That's a little faded up there, but I think we can work it. So the business model. Our partner was a company in New York called Running Subway. Running Subway is kind of a diverse entertainment company. They own the lease to the Discovery Channel Times Square Exhibition Center in Times Square. They've produced a number of Broadway shows, and they have gotten deeply embedded in the exhibition field. We used a designer named Ralph Applebaum and Associates. Applebaum is very, very famous for designing museums and designing museum exhibits. And the company that actually built all the hard cases, the walls, all of that for us is a company called Maltby, and they are also specialists in museum exhibitions, and they're right here in Mount Laurel, New Jersey. Costs us $6 million to put the exhibit together. Well, even after the $6 million is spent, there's a lot that goes into it from a financial standpoint. So to just have the scrolls, we have to pay the Israeli Antiquities Authority a preservation fee. That runs $500,000 per market. That money goes back to the Antiquities Authority to further their mission in not only protecting the scrolls, but if you've been to Israel, there's over 200 official archaeological dig sites in Israel now. It's just a tremendous hotbed for archaeology. It goes to fund those projects as well. The amount of personnel from the Antiquities Authority that need to travel back and forth for opening ceremonies, the couriers that carry the scrolls back and forth, some of the installation crew and specialty curators runs about another $250,000 per market. The labor to build it and take it down is another $350,000. To transport it is about $50,000 per market. We use special art handling companies. So forget the scrolls for a minute. Many of the objects are as old as the scrolls and have been meticulously put together. A custom case needs to be created for each artifact. They're carefully packed and transported. Each market is spending between $500,000 and $750,000 in marketing. And then to run the exhibit in their institution, things like ticket takers, security, janitorial, runs another $200,000 to $300,000 per market. So the business model is not meant for a for-profit company. It is really meant for organizations that seek to do this on an educational level. And in fact, the scrolls and the objects cannot be lent to any company that is a for-profit company. Only nonprofits with an educational mission are permitted to borrow the objects per Israeli Antiquities Authority charter. As we all know, nonprofit doesn't necessarily mean no money. So we have to make our money back, and we have to generate some sort of a surplus because we look at it as a project to fund our own mission at the Franklin Institute as well. So in addition to the ticket sales, we travel with an audio guide, which we charge extra for, and we have a retail store that travels with the exhibition as well. So we talked about New York, Philadelphia, Cincinnati. It next moves to Boston Museum of Science. It'll open there in May. It'll play there through the fall. And then we just concluded negotiations in a place that you might think is very unlikely, Salt Lake City. We've been studying the demographics of who's been coming to this exhibit for a long time, and I think everyone will be surprised. Jews represent the minority, and not just because that we are a minority in society, but because the scrolls have such deep importance to Christianity and Islam as well. The biggest segment of our audience is evangelical Christians. So forget Catholics for a minute. Evangelical Christians make up more than 40% of our audience. Unfortunately, they're the hardest folks to market to because of their diverse organization. Brigham Young University in Provo, some of their professors were involved in actually translating the scrolls. So there's an effort underway now to get those folks in Utah to identify all the scrolls that they were involved in interpreting so that we can actually bring those exact scrolls to the Leonardo in Salt Lake City. We have 2 more cities In between there that are still TBA, we're looking at markets like Phoenix, Chicago, Los Angeles, Fort Lauderdale, Norfolk, Virginia. There's a lot of interest. The complexities are, one, can everyone make the financial model work? Can they get underwriting? Can they get sponsorship? Does it fit that jigsaw puzzle of a tour schedule? Do they have the physical space? The Israeli Antiquities Authority literally needs to do a site tour of every museum and pun intended, bless the museum before we're allowed to take the scrolls. So we have 2 more that are still to be determined. And then it looks fairly certain that we're going to close in Denver at the Museum of Nature and Science. This would be sometime in 2016. All the objects, so 600 objects in this exhibition, will have come from Israel and stayed in this country the entire time. It is only the scrolls that continue to swap back and forth. And that is actually the end of the slide presentation itself. A lot of people ask about how the scrolls are transported. They are sealed in a vacuum cylinder at the Rockefeller Museum where they come out of storage. They are given to a courier. It is not announced early what flight that courier is going to be on, but they take commercial flights. In fact, because US Air has a hub and US Air is a sponsor of the Franklin Institute, they provided a lot of the air travel, but the courier will sit in a business class seat and the scroll will have its own business class seat that we, of course, have to pay for. But no one knows that that person is on board with a scroll. When the scroll arrives here in the US, he's met by an armored car, and that armored car transports the scroll to the institution where it is supervised by one of those 4 people who can touch it for installation actually into its case. Yes, sir.
Question. You mentioned the scrolls contain laws, ideas, thoughts of that time. The Torahs that sit in the synagogue today, would you say they came from that, or they were around the time, or what?
The writings, the ancillary writings that I spoke about really deal more of with the government of the time, so the culture of the Essenes. However, the Torah is literally, you can literally recreate the Torah from the 900 scroll fragments. Again, there are some missing, but it's at a point where if you put them all together, you know where the missing pieces are and you know what they say at this point. So it is really, I mean, it is evidence. It is the oldest version of the Torah in existence today.
Does your exhibit move intact to all these museums, the entire way you had it in Franklin there?
It's a good question. All the elements do, but every museum is different. So we designed this exhibit to be very portable. It comes apart. It takes about 2.5 weeks to put up and about 10 days to take down. So the scroll table, for instance, you know, it's rare that we can find a space where there's not columns. So we designed the scroll table with movable panels in the center so that columns can literally go in. And all the climate control is in the center of that table too. So we had to design it so if we had to move a humidification unit from here to accommodate a column, we could. So the layout will differ a little bit. The elements will be the same.
Going back to your earlier presentation, where will that new building be placed for the Franklin?
For the Franklin Institute, if anyone is familiar with where our parking garage exit is, there's a U-shape. It'll drop right there. So we've completed the fire tower for the new building. We relocated the parking exit along Ray Street. And the building is literally being built right into that U-shaped slot right there.
In your talk, you didn't mention the planetarium part. Was that ever upgraded? Because I used to go there almost every day to try to
Yeah, you know, it's funny. I still miss the old big center projector, that thing with the domes on either side and it would tilt. It has been fully upgraded. It's a complete digital system now, so the projector isn't in there. And in fact, we've recently gotten back into the planetarium production business. We're producing a show called Space and Back and distributing it with our partner Skyscan, and that premieres in March. And literally we'll start seeing distribution in Asia by April. I think there was a question.
Each individual scroll, do they know who really wrote them? same by?
No, they are not signed. So there is no way to determine an individual author. As a group, the belief of most Jewish scholars and the belief of the Israel Antiquities Authority was it was this group, the Essenes, who were escaping both religious and political persecution at the time and were looking for a much simpler way of living, which is why they relocated where they did. We do not know what drove the Essenes out of Qumran. It is assumed that the Romans, as they crossed from Jerusalem to the Dead Sea before the conflict at Masada, that they most likely encountered the Essenes, whether there was a conflict there or whether the Essenes left the caves at Qumran before the Russians, excuse me, the Romans actually got there. We don't know. But again, the most people believe that they left there as the Romans moved east and north out of Jerusalem.
You said that there's 900 fragments altogether. About how many at one time are with the exhibit?
There are only 10. But in the space of a market, there are 20. So there are 10 that are introduced at the beginning of the exhibit. About midway through, 10 new scrolls come in, again, to protect them from light and air exposure. So each market can see up to 20 at a time. But yeah, I forget the exact number, but it's over 900. Mike?
Yes, have they been able to tell from studies of the actual handwriting itself how many different authors were involved?
They have tried to do that. It's in not good enough shape. There are 3 languages, though. There's Assyrian, there is Greek, and Hebrew. Those are the 3 main languages. So the fact that they were written in 3 main languages probably tells you a little something over the cultural mix of people who were in the caves and how long it probably took to do that.
The scrolls that are in private hands, have they been translated?
Some have, some haven't. Basically, the Israel Antiquities Authority knows who has what scrolls and knows what they say. But whether there's been a public translation made, because they've basically all been exhibited at some point or another. In fact, when we launched this exhibition, immediately the seminary in Fort Worth built a Dead Sea Scrolls exhibit because they saw the press it was getting. So they had their scrolls on display. And I think there are certain times at this church in Teaneck that you're actually able to view their fragments.
Are they kept in the same meticulous way? Or
No.
Are they going to deteriorate?
No, and that's the fear. Some private institutions that own scrolls do take very good care of them. Others do not. Just to give you an idea, the Rockefeller Museum, where they're kept in Jerusalem, the relative humidity cannot sway more than 1.5% in either direction. The temperature cannot sway more than 2 degrees in any direction. One of our biggest challenges in touring this exhibit is keeping those climate-controlled conditions. So as I said, each one of those cases has its own temperature control, its own thermostat, its own humidity control, and hygrometer as well. And we have very expensive humidity units that so 10 of them, so each case gets its own, that control that. But yet, if you get a large crowd in the room, it's amazing that even in a sealed case, how it can affect the environment. If you have a dry spell outside, even if you have museum climate control in the gallery, that type of restriction is the most strenuous restriction that you will ever see in a museum. You can go to see museums all over the world, valuable artifacts, artwork, that again have their own ideal climate control conditions and restrictions. Nothing as stringent as the Dead Sea Scrolls. It's very challenging.
But how many people saw the exhibit at Franklin?
At the Franklin Institute, about 180,000 people. New York was about 200,000 people. Cincinnati will be about 150,000. The advanced group sale in Boston is phenomenal. We think we'll do about 250,000 people in Boston.
How many were Jewish out of that, Troy?
I'm sorry?
What percent were Jewish? You said 180?
average Jewish population for any of these cities is running 15 to 18%. In fact, New York was actually lower. So we said, you know, we spent an awful lot of time cultivating the Jewish market. Why aren't they coming? And we got a very interesting answer. Anyone guess?
They've never done that.
Too much money?
We saw it in Israel.
There you go. That's the answer. We saw it already. Now, of course, we'll tell you, you've never seen it like this. This is theatrical. This is meant to be a little showy and give you a little education as well. But most people say, we'll go to Israel to see it. This one.
Just curious if you know the actual real numbers for humidity and temperature. That's the engineer.
The engineer, God, I knew I was going to be asked this question.
Make it up.
Yeah. I think 2 degrees on either side of 68. And from a relative humidity standpoint, I think it's 1.5% on either side of, it's in the low 50s, like 51 or 52.
Would you come back to Philadelphia as a permanent exhibit?
No. So originally, the Antiquities Authority gave us 4 cities. And we based our business model on being able to recoup our capital investment in 4 cities. Everyone was so thrilled with it that it's now up to 7, possibly with Denver an 8th. So they keep extending the loan. When the loan of the artifacts is over, everything goes back to Israel. So
I went there. I saw it in Philly. I've seen it in Israel. When it goes back to Israel, will Israel put this type of exhibit on display?
They have been talking about now, based on this exhibit, doing something different. Right now, there's no definite plans to do so.
When you go to Israel, you see it.
Yeah, you see the Shrine of the Book, and you see scrolls in cases, and some of them aren't even real. We own all those walls, all the media pieces, all the custom cases, and of course, there's some salvage value to it. So we created an LLC to tour this exhibit, and when the exhibit's over, we're going to liquidate everything and dissolve that company. But we are considering these discussions with Israel. If they want all that material, they can purchase it from us and take it, because it's no use to us anymore. Yes, sir.
Were the scrolls the first time they found some of the old Torahs, or were the old Torahs found before the scrolls?
There were Torahs that were found of historical significance before the scrolls, but now we're talking a period of, the next oldest version is probably between 800 and 1,000 years newer than the scrolls. So the time difference was incredible. To find something that old that replicated the Torah was validation for Christians and Jews alike.
How accurate is the Torah of today to what they found there?
Pretty damn close, yeah. There are some wording differences, but you find no different than the wording differences that you may find in one Torah to another here in Cherry Hill at a synagogue. So it's that close. Pretty amazing.
We have our own scroll.
Oh.
And that's a certificate of appreciation, because you did a fantastic job. We really did.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Very much.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
And if you keep that for 2,000 years,
yeah,
in 68 plus or minus 2 degrees, right?
It'll still be there. Yeah. Written in Sharpie, I have. Right? Thank you. Thank you. Oh yeah.
$57.
How many? Just one?
Just one. Oh no. Actually, we're going to do it the other way. We're going to go for the T-shirt. No. Let's do the winner first. So This is the winner with the money, and then we'll do the T-shirts.
326068. 326. There we go.
Alan, a cup of coffee.
Thank you.
Where's Alan?
Does this go? Is there an accountant in the room? Do they?
All right. All right. Now go for 3 more.
3 more. One at a time. First T-shirt. 487-979. 487-979.
Nobody wants the shirt.
Yeah.
I don't even have to look like that.
There we go.
There you go. There's one shirt.
We believe you.
Hold on.
Give a size small.
There you go. Any size you want, as long as it's long. All right. Next one.
Oh, sorry about that.
Not heavy.
487-865. 487-865.
Somebody right after me.
487-865.
Going once. Going twice. I got it? Okay.
All right.
Hey, buddy. You put 2 arms in there now.
And the last one.
Last one. 326-199.
Hey, I got that one.
Ah.
I got that one.
Thanks so much.
Thank you very much. It's a good time. Good time. So,
oh, yeah. Okay. If you volunteered to work at the Purim Carnival, don't forget that's downstairs. There are 2 shifts, 12:30 to 2:30 and 2:30 to 4:30. If you plan to come to our March 31st meeting, you're going to find an empty room because we're not having a March 31st meeting. It'll be the Middle East Institute on March 17th. We expect to see you all there. The events are always excellent, and we do a lot of work for it. Pardon?
The sign-up sheet for that did not come around.
The sign-up sheet did not come around.
Everyone,
All right.
yes, it did.
Okay. Return your name tags. Richie says, thank you all for the food. Thank you all for who volunteered to put together the food and work so hard. We do appreciate it. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Have a good month.